So, welcome to the Kermode Uncut blog, and my favourite time of the week when I sit down with your responses to a number of threads currently running, one of which is I did a blog about watching Metropolis again with the new footage and saying actually the biggest change for me was seeing it with a different score, because I'd seen it with the Giorgio Moroder score. And I made reference to a couple of films which had had more than one score, specifically Ridley Scott's Legend, which famously had a score by Tangerine Dream and by Jerry Goldsmith. And I asked you to give me some more examples of movies that had two scores, and you've done so in your huge numbers. But oddly enough, this thread threw up a previously untapped welter of support for Tangerine Dream. Here are just a few posts. This from John Atfield. I personally prefer the Tangerine Dream soundtrack to Legend. This may be due to nostalgia, but when I saw the Jerry Goldsmith scored version many years later, I was completely thrown off by it. I know this goes against the grain of popular opinion, but with the Jerry Goldsmith traditional classic score, it makes Legend into just another fantasy genre movie. With the Tangerine Dream score, it gives it a greater individualism and its own identity. And the love continues with this from Brian in the New Forest. I mean, I'd like to mention Miracle Mile, a perfectly decent Tangerine Dream soundtrack. So is their work on Risky Business, which may seem slightly dated out of context, but perfectly suits the film and the times the film was set in, so is no more dated if you consider the film as a period piece. And this from Blue Juicer, who flies the flag for Michael Mann's The Keep. Tangerine Dream's synth pop up against World War II Nazi stormtroopers. Somehow it works though. And I would like to add to this that I personally own not one but two copies of Tangerine Dream's soundtrack for a Sorcerer. A flawed film perhaps, but a favourite of mine, and I love the synth pop score. On to the subject of how far you would go to see a film such as Uncle Boonmee, Who Can Recall His Past Lives. I did a post saying, you know, I think it's a great film, but is there a cinema near you showing it? And if so, is it showing it any time in the near future, or will you have to wait until the DVD comes out? Two very interesting responses. This from the frankly unpronounceable Arg, presumably a close relative of Dr. Huff. The simple fact is that the Uncle Boonmees of this world are only really viable in places where there are enough cineasts to support them. Distributors aren't going to waste money on extra prints or hard drives that won't be watched. Instead, they'll make a few and punt them to places where there is a sizable art house cinema market. So the answer to how far would you travel to see Uncle Boonmee is a straightforward and universal: keep travelling until you find a cinema load of people who want to watch it too. And this, very interestingly, from Necromantic99, as a manager of a one-screen cinema, I feel it necessary to explain why it's so difficult to see these films. If you want to play a film on the release date, you typically have to commit to a 2-week run, with usually not being allowed to show any other films during this period. This is fine if you have 3 or 4 screens, but one screen is a virtual impossibility unless you're showing, for example, a Harry Potter film. Uncle Boonmee may be a wonderful film, it really is, but for a rural location like ours, it would be commercial suicide to play it for that long. We try to balance it out. We play the Harry Potters to generate money, which in turn helps to support the independent movies that we want to be showing more of. And in order to do that, most art house cinemas not in a city location will play off date when the distributor allows you to show this film for just a few days. Thanks, incidentally, to New Wave Films, who seem to be responding individually to inquiries here on the blog about where people can actually get to see Uncle Boonmee. That is service with a smile. Finally, onto the subject of The King's Speech, which, as you probably know, just recently won big at the Biffers. The King's Speech is a controversial film because it's the story of a royal who learns to overcome their stammer by swearing. It was originally given a 15 certificate by the BBFC, then they reconsidered and gave it a 12. Now, the makers of Made in Dagenham have said, well, hang about a minute. In our film, workers swear, we got a 15 certificate. In their film, royalty swear, they got a 12. And I asked you to tell me whether you thought the BBFC were being classist. Two of your responses perfectly sum up your answers. This from Rich Indeed. Simple answer to your question mark, no. Made in Dagenham has more uses of the F word, and its use is not integral to the plot as it is in The King's Speech. For this reason, even if the films had the same amount of swearing, I could still probably understand the BBFC's classification as the swearing in Made in Dagenham is more gratuitous. And this from Joe 90 and a bit. Yes, Mark, they are being classist. And they are keeping alive a French-Norman arrogance to language which says Saxon words are evil compared to their French Romanic equivalents. Liberate the Anglo-Saxon in you, swear at someone with a smile. But don't do it here on the blog, it'll get cut.